Welcome back to the channel. My name is Michael. I've taken a couple day break from doing videos and I feel a little bit better. I've been training for an amateur boxing match for a organization called Street Beefs, and my first fight is on January 6th. I'm fighting for a number of reasons. Number one, for myself. I am a little bit over 2 years sober, so I'm grateful for that. Um, for me, I'm fighting for myself first, um, by the grace of God. And number two, I'm fighting for my kids. I haven't seen my kids in a couple of years. And so for me, this is my kind of like facing my giants type of event where I know what I'm fighting for. It reminds me of um it reminds me of that boxing movie about Cinderella Man. And he knew when he got his second chance to go back into fighting that it was like make or break time for him. So he fought with a reckless abandon. And I feel like I'm getting that point, man. I feel like I'm getting to that point where I'm just like ready to let out my frustration um in a good old fashioned slubber knocker of a fight. So I'm getting ready for it, man. My training is progressing fairly well. I mean, I'm just practicing on my own, but anywho, enough about that. We're supposed to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about a guy named Vivek Ramaswamy, a guy who is running in the Republican Party for as to get the Republican Party nomination as a candidate for the presidency. Um, and I wanted to take a little bit more of an in-depth look into his personal biography, into his personal life, to analyze some of his characteristics and take a look and see, is this somebody that is compatible for me belief-wise? Is it somebody that's compatible for a philosophically, is he compatible for somebody who has a Judeo-Christian perspective? Because that's the perspective that I'm coming for on this channel, is somebody who is conservative, somebody who has a Christian, Judeo-Christian perspective on life and how, from the Bible, that we are to live, how we're supposed to operate with money, and then how we're supposed to operate in the world in regards to our day-to-day actions. So yeah, we're going to get into that in a second. We'll get there. We'll get into that. But yeah, so I'm just grateful. I ask simply for this. If you are interested in boxing at all and want to see me fight, I'm thinking about using the recording from that January 6th fight and then uploading that to this channel, um, and giving a little bit of like an insider's perspective, maybe recording some videos and stuff along my way, like, just the progress as I get ready for it and all that kind of stuff, like a behind the scenes type thing. I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking a lot about it. Um, But with no further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into Vivek Ramaswamy. Let's go ahead and show you. He kind of looks, he kind of looks, I don't want to be rude. I'm trying not to be mean, but he looks like a cartoon. He almost looks like an AI character. I don't know why that is. I don't want to be rude about it. I don't want to be mean, but because like everybody has, you don't have a lot of choice over your genetic gifting, but the guy just reminds me a lot of like something that you would find in a new Disney AR cartoon. That's what it reminds me of. Charles, can you please stop looking? Every time I get on here to record, he sits right behind me and then he starts grooming himself by licking constantly. And all I hear in the background is him licking himself. So it's getting on my nerves. Like, stop licking yourself, Charles. Um, maybe Vivek Ramaswamy can help me out with that. So let me dive into this. First of all, the guy is uh, let's just go with his credentials, okay? First of all, he was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, to two Indian immigrant parents. All right, so he's a naturalized citizen. Um, he is extremely intelligent. He's probably in your top 3 percentile of intelligence quotas in the political candidacies all across the board, he's clearly a very intelligent guy. Why do I say that? Well, number one, he graduated from Harvard with a bachelor's degree in biology, and then later on earned a JD from Yale Law School. Listen, just to get into Harvard alone, you have to be among the top 5 percentile in your class. Bottom line, you're not going to be able to get in unless you have extremely good academic credentials, testing scores. I mean, you got to be up there to be able to get into that level of education. And the same thing with Yale Law School. I mean, to get into Yale Law School, you probably are going to need to be even in the top 5% of your bachelor's level education. So the dude probably had either not a perfect GPA score or really close to it, would be my guess. Um, and he was productive even while he was in college. He started some venture capital hedge funds and got investment partners and started different companies while he was going to school. So he wasn't just biding his time while he was in school. The dude was investing and raising funds. And so clearly he is a very intelligent man. So you got to give him his props on that. I mean, clearly just, he's a businessman, he's an author, political candidate, and he's only 38 years old. He was born August 9th of 1985. So the dude literally is still in his prime. And just as a side note, I still think maybe I should hold my thoughts to the end. I'll hold those thoughts until the end. But anyway, the dude speaks multiple languages. His father uh is a part of like a technological institute, National Institute of Technology in Calcutta. He worked as an engineer and a patent attorney. So he comes from good genetics. I mean, he obviously clearly has really smart parents, and his mother, I think, was in school for medical college and research, and she was a geriatric psychiatrist. So you could tell he got those genes, so to speak, from both of his parents. Um, and if you look at his religion, so now we'll jump into his religious background. He's not a Christian. He is a monotheistic Hinduist, and that in and of itself is not necessarily as compatible with a Christian frame of reference. Yes, you can be monotheistic. And yes, I believe from what I'm understanding, of course, according to his own religious perspectives, he describes himself as believing in one God. Um, However, that's not necessarily compatible with Hinduism itself. So I'm just on that alone, just based off of his religious beliefs alone, I can't necessarily accept the fact that he doesn't recognize Jesus as his personal Lord and Savior. Um, so if he potentially would win and he would place his hand on the Bible, there would be no oath to that. There would be no connection and sovereignty in that particular situation because he clearly doesn't believe in Jesus. However, from what I'm understanding and what I've been able to get based off of reading about him, um, he seems to be advocating for traditional family values. He uh he does like to appeal to the evangelical Christians, which are mostly conservative and on the right. Um, and he's just appealing to the Christian nationalists, the people who are patriotic voters who, you know, are Bible believing, gun toting Christians is essentially the type of people he's trying to rally around. But we're going to hold on to that thought. We'll come back to that in a minute because he clearly has a lot of charm and charisma. He says it himself that he always liked to debate. So I think he's a master debater. Yeah, just saying. Um, Interestingly enough, he attended Cincinnati's St. Xavier High School, which was a Catholic school affiliated with the Jesuit order. and graduated valedictorian in 2003. Not a surprise. That's not a shocker. Clearly very intelligent. Um, Here's something that I found interesting about him. While he was in college, he performed Eminem covers in libertarian themed rap music under the stage name alter ego Vivek. We got to listen to this stuff. Hold on. Did anybody record these things? Let's see. Let's see. Vivek. Vivek rapper. Let's see. Can we hear any of it? Okay. Yeah, we've got to listen to this because what the heck? If I'm doing a review of a presidential candidate, we might as well listen to this guy rap.
In college, I've seen the video, you were a libertarian rapper.
I say my name's Vivek. It rhymes with cake. It ain't about thee. It isn't about me. It is about thee. The United States is about liberty. So Fox and friends, join us on the trail. We'll have some fun. I'll see you out the trail.
Very nicely done, sir.
Liberty. So Fox and friends, join us on the trail. We'll have some fun. I'll see you out the trail.
Okay. Well, fair enough to him. Good for you. I appreciate that this guy is a man of many talents. That's for darn sure. Hey, look, just based on his personality, I'd probably want to have a cup of tea with him and just enjoy his company because he sounds like a pretty charming and charismatic guy. Not necessarily, he hasn't won me over as a voter yet, but definitely somebody that's interesting. So as I had said before, while he was in Yale, he was already getting wealthy from activities in finance, pharmaceutical, and biotech industries. He had already had $15 million worth of net assets before graduating from law school. Dude, I had probably like $200,000 worth of debt when I was in my PhD program. So I had literally probably no net assets. So when it comes to just his ability to be resourceful and somehow gain that amount of wealth in such a short period of time while he was in law school, kudos to him. I mean, dude, I would imagine that most people while they're in law school are banking on the fact that they're going to have to defer their loans until they become independently wealthy over the course of 5 to 10, maybe even 15 years, or get into politics and get rich by joining with a bunch of neocons. You could do it that way too. Career. This is where it gets a little bit more, what am I thinking the term? It gets a little bit more questionable when we start looking at his biotech companies. All right. And this is why this is why I get a little bit skeptical when I see how somebody is using like hedge funds and investors from like BlackRock and a whole bunch of other different companies that are looking to invest in pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies are not really popular right now. I think most people, if you would look at everything that happened with COVID-19 and how the pharmaceutical industrial complex has gained such a huge, I would say, access to the network of politicians, right? They're bought and paid for by pharmaceutical companies. I mean, there's a reason why now every time that I don't watch TV, but even on some of the ESPN commercials on ESPN Plus, you have these dumbass pharmaceutical company commercials coming on. Why is that? Well, the answer is very simple. They're bought and paid for. So, and I don't think pharmaceutical companies, especially after COVID-19, are going to be a very popular source of confidence when it comes to political candidates. I'm not necessarily believing or interested or really sold that somebody who gained over $360 million. All right. This is what he did. He raised in 2019 or 2015, he raised 360 million for a biotech company called Ryovant Sciences, otherwise known as Roe or Roe. He gained $100 million in startup capital from QVT and other investors, and used hedge fudge managers. His strategy was to essentially purchase the rights to patented drugs that had either failed or not reached trial phase to that point. And his idea was that he was going to push those drugs through, like dermatology drugs, urological drugs, Chinese-based Sonavant drugs, and try to penetrate the Asian market. And so as a part of that, he raised 360 million for the subsidiaries of his company for the drug called Intiperdine. Forgive the, yeah, so, and which was an Alzheimer's drug. He purchased that. The company he purchased it was for about $5 million, a small amount of money when you consider pharmaceutical companies nowadays. If you purchase, let's say Tylenol, for example, was no longer patented, and you could get a patent for it. You know, Tylenol nowadays is worth how much? A bunch of money, hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you could exclusively get the rights to that patented drug and then distribute it through your company alone to start, you would instantly become a multimillionaire and probably billionaire at this point. So he was hedging on the fact that he was going to get these drugs, that his pharmaceutical company subsidiary was going to develop these drugs and push them to the market and get them approved. And he called himself the Berkshire Hathaway of drug development. Well, what happened? What happened to the actual drug and what happened to the actual company? This is where people need to read between the lines. So clearly he was charming. He raised a lot of money, $315 million in its initial public offering. That's a lot of money to raise. And then the company's market value launched. It rose up to like $3 billion value in assets, in its valuation. And it, you know, sounds great in theory, but then what happened? The drug that he had banked pretty much this entire company on, this Alzheimer's disease drug, Intiperdine, it failed. And what happened? Well, he just so happened to claim $37 million in capital gains in 2015. He took out that money from the company, and then the company failed. The company's value plunged by 75% in one day and then continued to decline afterwards in 2017. So the shareholders who lost money, they all included people like me and you, and institutional investors, California State Teachers Retirement System Pension Fund. And guess what? Vivek himself was insulated for the majority of those losses because he held his stake through Rovant. All right. And where did he place this investment? In Bermuda, a tax haven. So, so yeah, like, to me, when I read this and I read somebody's spreadsheet on how they gain their wealth, I find this to be highly questionable and not necessarily somebody that I would be interested in electing as a presidential candidate. I think when I look at somebody like this who raised a ton of money, what does that speak? To me, it speaks that he's clearly charismatic and he can talk people up, right? If you watch some of the debates, the guy clearly has the ability to raise a lot of interest in a very short amount of time using spirited conversations, spirited debates, debunking people really quickly, throwing out a bunch of facts very quickly, and gaining a bunch of support because of how quick and witty and intelligent the guy is. He can cut people's arguments down very quickly. He studies his opponents before he gets into the debates, and he just crushes their arguments very quickly. So, yes, of course, we watch somebody like that and we're like, oh my God, it's the younger Trump. This is great. But no, hold on a second. Where did he get his wealth from? And that's where we have to look at these pharmaceutical companies and these tax haven industries where you can start a company in somewhere like Bermuda, not have to pay taxes on it, raise $360 million for what? So that you can develop a couple drugs and then try them to get them into market. But what happened? The drug didn't pass through the trial phase successfully, and the company failed. 75% losses on that. So who lost? Well, the investors. So, that's what I'm saying. Like, he gained money out of that. He gained a significant amount of wealth out of that. $37 million just in 2015 alone. He gained $37 million. That's a lot of money. So, I mean, kudos to him for having the charm and the charisma to be able to gain a bunch of investors. But at the same time, I'm not a huge fan just for that simple fact. So, um, let's see. So yeah, so in 2017, obviously the company announced that that drug had failed its clinical trial. And then, now he's got investments. So in 2017, Roivant partnered with a private equity arm of the Chinese state-owned CITIC Group to form Sonavant. So now the dude's got a ton of assets invested in Chinese state-owned groups. And they invested $1.1 billion. They were because of that. It was like he made a deal. He made a deal with China. Like, oh, okay, hey, I'm gonna make a deal with these Chinese folks, and then because I'm able to now penetrate the Asian market, I'm gonna get a deal with these people and those people. And then now all of a sudden, that company, that former company that he had started, he hedged its bet by gaining other investors. And they just so happened to be a Chinese private equity firm. Well, ooh. So he made another $175 million from capital gains on the sale of that company. So, so does it sound familiar? Does it sound like somebody that you would trust to run your country? Somebody that is raising money for a company that is acting as a shell to gain a bunch of investors in a tax haven state of or Bermuda, gaining all those capital gains off of the investments. So like when you take your company public, you raise a bunch of money for that company. He gained the popularity, gained the money and the prestige for that. And then what he did, he cut his losses. He took the money from the company and then he ran. Oh my. Now you could say that that company that is in place, this pharmaceutical company, it started a nonprofit to like do good things because they're so profitable now. But it's like ill-gotten gain, and I talked about this on my prior podcast. If you have ill-gotten gain, it's gonna fail you at some point. And I don't think that that particular wing of his investment portfolio is a very above board type of asset acquisition. I just don't see it. So, I could go on and on and on about his business investments. He's got other different types of things that he talks about. I I do think somebody like this guy is probably going to need at least another 10, 10 years, I would say, probably another 10 years to build himself up into a more um, solid presidential candidate. I think he needs more time to establish himself as a person. I think he's too young. He's only 38 years old. So I think he needs some more time in the oven to let us all see what his investments will turn out to be in the long run, right? And I think he needs to cut ties with these private Chinese firms. This company that gained him almost $400 million in excess of his own profit for himself through these companies. Um, I think that's questionable. And I think that when we look at presidential candidates, I admire the fact that he shared his tax returns for an extended period of time. So he's trying to be honest and upfront. And I appreciate that just as a man. I appreciate somebody that's like, hey, look, hey, here's how I made my money. So he's open about it. But at the same time, I question how he got that. And that's not just being, I'm not trying to be jealous at all. I'm just saying, like, as a common man, American citizen who struggles to make ends meet, and is, unable to feed myself, uh, about halfway through the month, who's living paycheck to paycheck and is going to be starting businesses and wants to be successful. I could learn from somebody like him, certainly, how he was able to use his charm, charisma, and intelligence to be able to raise funds. But to me, it seems kind of slimy. It seems slimy. So I don't want any president to have ties with Chinese investment firms. I don't want any candidate or congressperson. And I'll say just this, just to put this out there. I've said it before on prior podcasts too, but I think any single politician that takes money from any outside interest group should A, be barred from politics for the rest of their life. Two, I think they should have to pay back any monies that they got from those interest parties back to the American people. And then three, depending on the severity of those ties in their own politics and their own policies that they enacted, should be tried for treason. Because the American people are not being represented when that person is bought and paid for. When that deep state has access to a candidate or a congressperson or a senate person or a presidential candidate or whomever, and that person has money coming into them to influence them, to me, that's treason. That's how I see it. Um, your job as a candidate, congressperson, or senate person, house, whatever part of the government that you're a part of, your job is to serve. It's not to gain wealth off of the people in your place and the power that you gain. If you do it, to me, that's treason. And I think obviously we need to have a certain type of court specially for this. I think we need to have a system, a court system that has its own outside, nonpartisan judgment seat that oversees and it holds candidates and Congress people accountable. We need to have and it used to be the justice system, but it's almost like this two-tier justice system. The elites up at the top can get away with whatever they want, but the normal common man would end up in jail for anything. Yeah, I've mentioned this before. I talk to God a lot, and He shows me these things, and He gives me ideas, and I do a lot of thinking about it. I really do. I sit around thinking, and I'm just like, well, I really do think that we need to have an outside judicial system that holds all of our politicians accountable for their how they gain their money. If you come out of office more wealthy as a result of your influence that you gain and the power and the control and the manipulation while you're in office in any way, shape, or form, that's not servitude. That's greed. And what God has shown me is that we are in a time where justice is going to reign supreme, where God is going to start holding these people accountable. The people like me and you are going to no longer stand for this bull crap, where our votes are going to make a difference, and then our activism is going to put things over the top because our country, our people are tired. This is what Trump ran on in 2016, was he was going to clear the swamp. And he was starting to do a pretty good job, but you could see even in his own attempts, he became the public enemy number one for the left. And the legacy media has just attacked him with all these bullcrap, contrived things, the Russian conspiracy and a whole bunch of other junk. And even now, you see how people are attacking Trump to try to get him to pay all these ridiculous civil trials for the January 6th attack on the Capitol, which is a joke. So I think people are seeing through it. I think what we're going to end up seeing in the long run with this candidacy, with Vivek Ramaswamy, I think he's going to end up probably ending in a net gain for him personally as a popularist. I see him as being somebody that may take a couple votes from Democrats and skew them towards the Republican side just because of his popularist nature and his charm and his wit. But I don't see him being able to win an election on his own at this point. Like I said, he's only 38 years old and he's not tried and tested yet, in my own personal opinion. It seems to me, and I'm not trying to be rude, I think people can certainly, he was born to really well-to-do parents and lived a fairly moderately upscale life. I don't necessarily see how that individual had to go through any kind of long suffering. So I can't relate to that. I can't relate to that. I can only relate to my personal experience. Now, you could say Trump hasn't really had to suffer, but yeah, he has. Let's take a look at it. There's some of the things that he's gone through in his life. He's been through enough. And if you look at this trial, what the Democrats are doing is they're actually making him more relatable to the human man when they're using the justice system illegally, unconstitutionally, to try to trap him into a state of basically entrapment using the judicial system. All it does is it's going to do is ignite the Republican base and even grab the attention of other minorities and other people who used to be voting on the left. If you just watch any of these YouTube videos, I've been watching a ton of them where people are like, even black people. I mean, you just see the recordings of it, and they're all trashing Joe Biden right now, and they're all like anybody on these street people who just record, "Hey, who are you going to vote? Would you vote for Biden or would you vote for Trump?" And all of them are like, "Yeah, Trump, all Trump." It's all Trump. You know, the only people that are going to be voting for Biden at this point, who's I don't even understand how he's walking. 68% are single women. Single women, 68% is what he got in the votes from the last election. So it reminds me of Pearl from the Pearly thing saying, should women be able to vote? Well, I think if you look at the trend of what we're going into and what we've been struggling with, the Democrats, these liberal, crazy women, I'm just saying, if you want to look, if you want to point fingers at somebody or a group of people, it's probably going to rest a lot on the 68% of women, single women, who have nothing better to do than to pet their cat while they hit the blue button. So I know I shouldn't say that, but it's just true. Um, that being said, as I've said before on other podcasts, we both know, if you come from the Judeo-Christian perspective, we all know that this battle is not against flesh and blood. It is against the rulers, the principalities, and dark places of this world. That is why we are struggling as a country and as a globe, because the devil wants nothing more than to keep us distracted, to keep us apart from each other, to keep us separated, to have us all be fighting for the little tiny pieces of pie of victim mentality and all these different religious. That's one thing that I appreciate about Vivek Ramaswamy is he does recognize that we've essentially created all these sanctimonious religious class of genderism, of racisms, and all these different types of things. But if you were to just press me right now and ask me, what do you think about this Vivek Ramaswamy guy? I would say he's not going to get my vote. And I do think that if the best outcome for him is that he would potentially join Trump as like a vice president candidate. He's young, so he can appeal to more young voters. He's very intelligent, so he can speak the language of college students better than they can. He's clearly a businessman who knows how to make money work for him. And I think, he's on the path to becoming somebody that could be potentially a presidential candidate. But again, as a Judeo-Christian, you look at his belief system, it looks convoluted to me. If you look at his business investments, to me, they scream slime. So I think he's got to clean that up. I think he needs another probably 8 to 10 years to clean up his act, to square away his investments, to rid himself of Chinese investment firms, and to truly be a candidate that represents the common man. Um, so, so yeah, other than that, if it wasn't for all those other things, he'd be a great candidate. He would be. But that is not what I'm looking for as somebody who professes to be a believer in Jesus Christ and a follower of him. He is not a good candidate in that regards. But you always have your own right to vote. You can go to the polls and you can push the buttons on your own. My suggestion, as I've always said anytime from the beginning when I talked about these presidential candidates, my job isn't to tell you who to vote for. I feel like my job is just to tell you my thoughts on how we should be thinking about these candidates. So until next time, follow your dreams, because if you don't follow them, they will haunt you. Follow your dreams, whatever it is that you want to do. Don't give up. Plug away. Do a side hustle. Do 2 side hustles if you got to be able to get away from your dead end job and create the life for yourself that you want. So until then, I will see you in the next episode.